Salutations from the stars! 'Tis I, the eccentric Professor Copperstein. So, here we are in October looking for scary videos. Except it's getting a little bit more difficult to search because I'm getting everything I don't want. I don't want movie clips because I'll get a copyright strike. Anyway, so I'm just gonna go straight right in and look. I'll show you once I find something. This video is gonna be tried to be at least 30 minutes, and so I'm gonna have my timer for that. In fact, we just might have found her first. Okay, so let's go. Okay, our first video is going to be True Bathroom Horror Story Animated. Hopefully it's not really true, because I would not like that. Okay, let's begin.
This is a true horrifying incident that happened to me when I was very young. The year was 2007, and I was an 8-year-old girl studying at a primary school. The school was old, and it was built after the war and Japanese invasion in my country. I heard that there were Japanese 2007, and I was an 8-year-old girl studying at a primary school. The school was old, and it was built after the war and Japanese invasion in my country. I heard that there were Japanese army men and local people killed on the land brutally. And many teachers and students claim that they have encountered paranormal activity. Although I've never seen anything paranormal at the school, this place still gave me a creepy vibe. My class was located on the second floor, just beside the girls' bathroom. The chilling part is, we could see an old cemetery park from there before entering the bathroom.
That's nice and friendly for the kids. Kids, don't mind the graveyard, Ninitos. Just pay attention to your studies.
One day, when I was studying in my class, I wanted to pee. So, I asked the teacher's permission and went to the bathroom. I got into the first stall and locked the door. There was no light or anyone in there. It was just me. Everything was silent until suddenly, someone banged and kicked the door that was in front of me. I was in shock and froze for the first seconds. I don't know why, but I didn't scream for my life. I just quickly pushed against the door so the person wouldn't break in. After a few minutes, the banging stopped. I waited for a few more minutes and opened the door. There was no one in there. I walked out, ready to go back to my classroom. Then, I saw a student with broad shoulders and chocolate skin standing opposite of my direction. There was no one in there. I walked out, ready to go back to my classroom. Then, I saw a student with broad shoulders and chocolate skin.
Chocolate skin? Okay.
Standing opposite of my direction. He was looking at me with a smile on his face. I froze, because he was one of my classmates, and he actually sat near me. I think, after he saw me go out of the bathroom, he followed me, and that was him inside. I quickly returned to my classroom and didn't speak of anything about it to anyone. The student soon went in and sat down quietly. I cannot recall his name, but I still remember this incident even now. I will never forget this horrifying experience. I wonder what would have happened to me if I didn't lock the door, or if he had successfully broke in that day.
Well, that was truly something. Well, anyway, okay, so this one was pretty nice, actually. Yeah. Well, anyway, let's go on to our next video. Okay, our next is called a Midnight Horror Story. This is by Wansee Entertainment. Now, let's begin with this one. It's a Midnight Horror Story. So,
I'm not making this video for attention, or sympathy, or anything. I just want anyone who can help me to do that. My name's Daniel, and this is a story I wish I didn't have to tell. I've been a night owl my entire life. As a teen, I used to stay up way past midnight every night, watching terrifying videos on YouTube. I know now they were nothing compared to the horrors of the real world.
Number 15. Burger King foot lettuce. Sorry, I just had to.
Nothing compared to the tragedy my family and I went through. The story I'm gonna tell to you now. My parents, being teachers, had always emphasized the importance of sleeping well to me.
Yeah, what about the rest of the education system? you need 8 hours of sleep.
And would definitely disapprove of my late night routine. So I knew that if they'd caught me up at that time, I'd be in big trouble. At first, this wasn't a problem, but after I told them about a child predator in our neighborhood that I'd seen in one of my videos, they seemed to grow more and more paranoid, which was obviously understandable.
Oh,
Every night, I'd hear one of them wandering into my room, checking on me, and every night, I'd immediately turn off my light and pretend to be asleep. I never knew for sure if it was my mom or dad coming in, since obviously if I opened my eyes to see, they'd know I was awake. Mostly, I presumed it was my dad, from the heavy-sounding footsteps, but either way, I found it pretty hypocritical for them to preach to me about being up late when they were awake themselves.
Good point.
Sometimes I wondered if they knew I wasn't sleeping, because often it was only after what seemed like hours before they'd finally leave and go to check on Alfie. That's my little brother, and Lucy, my little sister. I'd have asked them about it, but I thought it would have confirmed any suspicions which they seemed to already have about my staying awake deep into the mornings of the next day. Like I said, I guess they were just paranoid about the child predator. It was stupid for me to presume any of these things, and I'll never forgive myself for it, but I did it all the same. Anyway, one day, Lucy's school, where my parents both work, announced a school trip. It meant they'd be gone at some point next month from Saturday morning to Sunday morning, and it meant that I'd finally get to watch the horror movie my friend had lent me, that my parents had refused to let me watch. There was one downside, though. I'd be left to look after Alfie. He, being only 6 years old, my mom was reluctant to leave him in my care alone, but my dad defended me, reminding her that Alfie had been up most of the night after a nightmare, so he'd probably sleep most of the day anyway. Besides, he reassured her, he's 17. He can be given a little responsibility. With a heavy heart, my mom agreed. I honestly wish she hadn't. Finally, the morning came for them to head off. It took longer than expected because my sister said some of her favorite toy dolls had been stolen, but eventually my mom persuaded her that they were probably just lost, and told me to look for them whilst they were gone. I begrudgingly agreed, and soon they were ready to go. As they were leaving, my mom gave me a stern word, reminding me to lock the doors, not go to bed too late, and take good care of Alfie. She told me she'd be watching through the security cameras to make sure I was looking after him properly. I told her she really didn't have to worry. Then we said our goodbyes, and they were off. Alfie and I spent most of the day playing outside, but came in after the frisbee landed near a strange man who Alfie said had been in his nightmare. I told him that was ridiculous, because even if he somehow was in his dream, he wouldn't be able to remember. Anyway, I went by myself to get it. I have to admit that the man was fairly creepy. He had a huge grin, and his eyes, staring right at me, seemed to be permanently forced further open than they were designed to go. His clothes all seemed to have been made from someone 50 years younger, as they struggled to cling to his fully grown body. He was cold, but he was wearing a sun hat, a tiny one for children, which barely fit on his head. I recognized it, but didn't know how at the time. If I'd learned anything from the videos I spent my nights watching, I'd have abandoned the frisbee and left. But clearly I didn't, because not wanting to feel like a baby, I approached him. As I got closer to the man, his smile disappeared, and he removed the hat and held it behind his back. I began to see his features in greater detail. He looked tired. He was pale and his eyes were bloodshot and had huge gaping bags under them. In the entire time it took me to get to him, the man didn't move an inch, other than the odd blink. Not even his eyes shifted. At this stage, I was getting uneasy. I just wanted to get it and leave. Hi, can I have my frisbee back, please? Thanks. The thought of that conversation, if you can even call it a conversation, still makes me shiver. I locked the front door as soon as we got home. We were both a bit shaken, and Alfie looked tired, so I gave him some more food and put him to bed. It took him about 2 hours to fall asleep. He kept complaining that he'd have another nightmare about that man. I told him he wouldn't, but he wasn't convinced.
I see him every night,
He whispered to me. Well, if you see him again, don't worry. I'll be here to fight him off. This seemed to settle him down, and soon he was fast asleep.
I'll doing this one.
At about 11, it was time to put my film on. I couldn't have my mom knowing that I was watching it, so I did something naive and ignorant, and something I'll always regret. I turned off the security cameras.
Oh.
I watched it for 2 hours straight.
You turned off the security cameras. Ay, pendejo. Oh, come on. Even when I sleep, I leave the proximity sensors on my spaceship on to make sure that my ship doesn't crash into anything. Gosh.
My eyes never straying from the screen. Until
See?
I replayed the
I'm not gonna give you any sympathy.
last few seconds of the film. But the sound didn't happen again. It was coming from inside my house. Alfie? He didn't reply, but I could see him under the covers, so I thought he was just asleep, and I didn't want to wake him up. I swear, if I thought anything worse had happened, I'd have checked. You okay? I thought maybe I was just worrying too much, hearing things. It was late, and the film had been scary. Maybe it was just all in my head. I knew from the sound of his voice it was him. Alfie! Alfie? Usually this much noise would have woken him up.
Así, así. Yes?
Alfie, what's going
Little
on?
brother's gone.
I knew something was wrong. It was him. The doll. I couldn't believe it. It had to be some kind of sick prank. It had to be. But it wasn't. It was the man I'd spoken to earlier. He'd taken my brother. Alfie! I was certain they'd be gone before I could reach them. But he didn't set off straight away. He watched as I tried helplessly to do something. I screamed and I shouted and I banged on the windows and I tried to open the doors, but nothing worked. It was all in vain. There was nothing I
Could
could
have
do
gotten a
for
rock
my
and
brother,
smashed the
my
windows.
best friend, as he was stolen away from me. It was too late for the police to do anything. It was too late for anybody to do anything. He was gone, and in time, I'd have to come to accept that.
You have 9 new messages. First message.
Hello? If you're out with Alfie, call me back when you get back in, please. Love you guys. Bye.
End of message. Second message.
Daniel, we've been trying to get a hold of you for hours. Is everything alright? Did you turn the security cameras off?
They'll be fine. The security system probably just glitched out. Hey, Alfie, just call us as soon as you can, okay? You know how Mom worries.
End of message. Third message.
Listen, Daniel, we're starting to get really worried now. If you don't pick up, one of us is gonna have to come home to check if everything's okay. Please pick up.
End of message. Fourth.
Daniel, are you okay? Daniel! What's happened? Please answer! I couldn't bear to tell them anything. That was 7 years ago. I never found him. When I asked my parents if they'd seen anything at all of this man whilst they checked on us during the night, they only looked at me, concerned and confused. What do you mean? They asked. I could only stare at them in horror. Every night, around 2, you'd come and check on Alfie, Lucy, and me to see if we were sleeping.
Daniel?
They told me.
No,
we
he
didn't.
didn't.
The police wanted security camera footage of the man, but of course, there wasn't any. It automatically deletes any footage older than 24 hours, which meant I'd been mindless enough to stop it recording on the only night we could have seen him. You know, the strange thing is, I don't even know if I want Alfie to be alive. Because if he is, God knows what that monster has done to him. Sorry if I've gone on too long, but the guilt's been killing me. I had to get it out somehow. I only tell it as a story because, well, people like stories, and I want as many people to hear this as possible. Alfie, if somehow you're watching, I love you, and I'm so sorry. Please, don't lose hope. And to the man who took you, it's not too late. If you have any heart at all, and even if you don't, please let my little brother come home. To everybody else, if someone comes into your bedroom at night, open your eyes. You never know who it might be. I still stay up late at night. It's not because I don't want to sleep. It's because I can't. In case anyone sees Alfie, this is the last good photo we took of him. That's it. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you for sticking around to the end.
Man, that one really hits you hard. Just this whole concept that your sibling was taken, but then ultimately it was your own fault. Could have all been avoided. Man, that one really hits you hard. Well then, it's time for us to get to our next video. Okay, our next video, this is it's gonna be a 10-minute video, but we cut out some 4 seconds of it because there was an ad. That was paid promotion. So let's go on. The Roommate animated.
Looking for a new roommate is always a daunting task. Even though you interview and take the time to get to know that person, you don't truly find out who they are until you start living with them. I had begun searching for a roommate after I decided to leave my current residency. I was contacted a couple of hours after placing an ad on the Facebook Marketplace. The message read,
Hey Chris, I'll be moving out of my current apartment this August and I'm looking to room with someone new, as my roommates are moving to California this year. I'm 27 and am currently going to school. When I'm not at school, I enjoy hiking and watching movies. I also apprentice at a taxidermy shop on the days I don't have class. Hope that's not weird. It's always been a fun hobby of mine. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing back from you. Have a great day, Lunaire.
My first and most obvious reaction after reading the message was to check her profile. She was a medium height, had long, messy blonde hair and green eyes. In her profile picture, I saw her standing with a man and a woman shoulder to shoulder. They each adorned goofy grins and held up peace signs. Under the photo, the caption read, "Love my roommates." I smiled to myself and decided to send her a message back. The sun beat down on us as we hoisted various objects to the second floor of our new apartment. It took us a couple days to get everything out of the moving trucks and into our new place, but as soon as we did, a wave of relief washed over our sweat-drenched and sore bodies. After a couple more hours of rearranging, we each grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the porch. We reminisced about old 90s cartoons and what video games we obsessed over as kids, and as the sun started to set, I truly felt relaxed and confident that things were going to work out. A week later, I started a new job for a construction company that was owned by a good friend of mine. As I was getting ready, I heard the front door swing open. I walked into the living room to see Lunaire and her friend David sliding in a large box. "What you got there?" I asked. Through a strained grunt, she replied,
I bought a freezer to store some of the animals I'm planning on using in my taxidermy work. I hope that's alright.
I was obviously hesitant at first, as there
Yeah, taxidermy.
was no mention of this happening in the first place, but I eventually accepted and returned to my room to continue getting ready for work.
It's a pretty big
I came
refrigerator.
home at around 9 p.m. after having a couple of beers with friends and noticed that the freezer was nestled snugly in the lower part of the pantry. A low hum could be heard reverberating off of the inner walls. I was curious to see what was inside, but didn't want to intrude on Lunaire's business, so I went into my room and changed into more comfortable clothing. After changing, I came back out into the kitchen and started making a sandwich. I opened the fridge and grabbed what I needed. As I turned around, I stubbed my toe on the edge of the island countertop and let out a long, exasperated grunt. Through my frustration, I slammed the fridge door shut and checked my toe to see if there was any bleeding. As I raised my head back up, I was greeted by a shadowy figure. Lunaire was standing in the doorway leading to her room.
I hate when that happens. Like,
The darkness behind her almost seemed to envelop her.
Is everything okay?
She said in a deadpan tone. "Shit, yeah, I'm sorry. I just slammed my toe into the corner of the countertop as I was making a sandwich. I hope I didn't wake you,"
It's fine.
she said in the same deflated tone as before. She then turned around and walked back into the darkness of her room. I could tell that she was pissed, so I quietly made my sandwich and retreated back to my room as well, only hearing the low hum from the freezer as I closed my door. I had the next day off, so I was able to sleep in a little longer than usual. When I finally emerged from my room, I walked into the kitchen to make breakfast. As I opened the refrigerator, I noticed that the light wasn't turning on and there was a lack of cold air escaping from inside. I turned around and flipped the light switch to confirm my suspicion. Sure enough, the power was out. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath. I walked over to Lunaire's room and knocked on her door to tell her about the power outage if she didn't already know, but there was no answer. I then remembered that she had classes that day and probably wasn't home. I walked back to the kitchen and past the pantry. As I did, I slipped on the floor but was able to catch myself on the countertop. "What the?" I angrily exclaimed as I looked down at the floor trying to figure out what I had slipped on. It was blood. It had started to leak from the corner of the freezer and pool onto the floor. I quickly tried to open the freezer to find out the cause of the viscous liquid, but then I noticed that it had a padlock attached to it. I don't remember seeing that before. I ran out to my car and grabbed my toolbox from the back seat. I approached the freezer and set my tools down on the nearby countertop. I then pulled out a small pair of bolt cutters and snapped through the metal of the padlock. It fell to the ground with a large thud. I creaked open the top of the freezer and was greeted with a putrid stench that permeated my nostrils. I quickly pinched my nose and walked away gagging in response. "I guess I should have realized that was going to happen," I muttered to myself in between gags. After gaining my composure, I grabbed some gloves from under the sink and started taking inventory. I could see a couple of dead birds and plastic bags wedged into the corners of the freezer. I took each bag out and set them in the trash can nearby. That's when I noticed that the blood was coming from the corner of the larger black bag. I don't know why, but I decided to open the top of the bag and peer inside. I was greeted by large, milky white eyes, a swollen black tongue surrounded by cracked and bloated lips, and the matted hair of a human head. I swiftly dropped the bag and fell backwards onto the floor. My breathing had ceased to exist, and I grabbed the trash can next to me and expelled my disgust into it. I then ran out the door, got into my car, and called the police. As I sat in the interrogation room with a blanket over my shoulders, I couldn't help but think about the face I'd seen. It looked so familiar. That's when it finally hit me. I pulled out my phone and looked at Lunaire's profile picture. It was her old roommate, the one she said was moving to California. When the detective entered the room, she started the questioning process, asking me if I started noticing any weird behavioral occurrences around the apartment. Yeah, I stubbed my toe the other day and she creepily stood in the doorway. It seemed like she was pissed, but for some reason I had a strange feeling like she was concerned about something. That's when I connected the dots. She didn't come out into the kitchen because she heard me stub my toe. She came out into the kitchen because she thought I slammed the freezer instead of the fridge. A cold sweat started to form on my forehead as my surroundings became blurred. I could hear a low whine slowly starting to cover up the words of concern from the detective. As my vision started to clear, I could see another officer enter the room and whisper something into her ear as he handed her a piece of paper. "Do you have somewhere you could stay at?" she asked. "I mean, I was planning on staying with my parents. They live about 30 minutes outside of town." "Okay," she paused. "Listen, I don't want to worry you, but we found this picture inside of your apartment." She slid the piece of paper across the table, and I immediately felt like someone kicked me in the chest. The head of Lunaire's other roommate sat on the chair. In the background, scrawled on the wall in blood, read, "Love my roommates. All of them."
Yeah, I'm not so sure what she was planning to do with those bodies.
Does this ever happen to you?
That's enough. Okay, so we should have one more for a 2-minute video. So let's go ahead and look. Okay, this is a 3-minute video. Choose Scary Imaginary Friend. This is by Llama Arts, who also made the previous video. And I think the video before that we all watched, I might have made a mistake again. Well, okay, so anyway, here we go.
I have a sister who got married when she was 18. She had a daughter named Susie. Her husband was unemployed. She had to work 2 jobs to support herself, her daughter, and her husband. Every day, she left the house at 8 a.m., and she only returned around 8 p.m. every night. Around this time, Susie had an imaginary friend. She told my sister it was a little girl named Jessica. Susie would talk about her all the time. My sister even overheard her talking to Jessica. It creeped her out, and after a while, she told Susie she was forbidden to talk about the girl. We weren't allowed to mention Jessica when we...
This sounds familiar. When I was around that age, I had a shit ton of imaginary friends. Especially when I was like around 10 years old. I used to have a problem where I would talk to myself a lot because I had a lot of imaginary friends when I was a little kid. So yeah, this one hits hard.
came over to visit. One day, Susie told her mom, "Jessica is mad at you because you don't believe she's real. She comes to play with me when Daddy closes the closet door after you leave, and he lets us out before you come home." My sister had no idea this was happening. Her husband was supposed to be watching Susie during the day. Instead, he would lock her in the closet with a box of cereal and leave her there all day. When my sister discovered what was going on, she kicked her husband out. The poor little...
Yeah, I have to take the mother's side on this one. You're letting a little kid just no, you're constraining a little kid to just this one closet. The kid should be out everywhere, exploring the house, having fun. And you're just cooping her up in this one little section of one room. That's bad. Hello, my communicator's about to go off. Okay, this is going to be our last video of the weekend.
Little girl spent so much time all alone, locked in a closet that she had conjured up an imaginary playmate for herself. My sister divorced her husband and got custody of Susie. She decided to move out of the house they were renting. When the moving van came, the old man who owned the house came over to help them. He was talking to my sister and said, "I was always worried about your little girl on those basement stairs. My granddaughter fell down those basement stairs and broke her neck. She died in front of the closet down there." When she heard that, my sister got the chills. "What was her name?" she asked. "It wasn't Jessica, was it?" The old man looked at her and said her name was Jessica. She was only 4 years old. She couldn't say it properly. And how did you know that's how she said her name, Jessica? How did you know? My sister was in denial. She told him she didn't know what he was talking about. She refused to talk about it, grabbed the last of her things, and left the house for good. Even today, we're still not allowed to talk about Susie and her imaginary friend, Jessica. My sister remarried a few years later, and Susie got a great new stepdad. But Susie, when we speak alone, she always brings up that little girl and what she looked like. And it still creeps me out to this day, because I don't really believe in that type of stuff with ghosts and paranormal, but there's no way that Susie could have known about that little girl. But who knows? Maybe they are real, and maybe not.
Well, let's look on the bright side of things. That girl was obviously very lonely, so you know what? For all we know, the Jessica could have been a friend to her. So maybe this was a good ghost. So anyway, that's about all the time we have left. As predictable as this story was, it did get a little ominous when you start to finally realize there was a ghost the whole time. So anyway, that's about the time we have left. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Do also check out my other videos, and remember, even in the darkest of times, there's always time for science. Sure, I'm Professor Copperstein. Hasta luego.